Once again, from the studios of UNO Television on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, consider this, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
I think it was the Hilton Hotel, 5-star hotel, and I hadn't been itching in a long time. So I go to bed that night, and I'm laying in bed, and all of a sudden I start itching again. I said, how can these have any bed bugs in this hotel? So finally I couldn't take it anymore. So I go in the bathroom, and they had a bathtub, and I filled the bathtub all the way up to the top with water. And then I got in the bathtub and went underneath the water and held my breath as long as I could. When I came up, all the bed bugs were floating. Psychologically, it's very troubling, because when I got those bed bugs off at that hotel and I went back to bed, I could still feel like I was being bit, but I wasn't being bit. I knew I didn't have any more bed bugs on me, but I still felt creepy. And that stays with me for quite a while.
That is just one of countless stories being told across the country, including right here in Nebraska. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, bed bugs. Joining us to talk more about them are Kathleen Q, UNL Extension Associate, Tom Sutko, owner of Pest Solutions 365, and Doug Gorham, also with Pet Solutions 365. He heads up the K9 unit. We'll meet his partner a little bit later in this program. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. All right, Kathleen, we're going to start with you and just the definition of a bed bug.
Well, a bed bug is a bug, obviously. And you have it right on about the size of an apple seed. There's a big misconception out there that bed bugs are invisible to the naked eye and that you need a microscope to see them, and that isn't the case. And they feed on blood. That's their only food source of mammals. And of course, you and I are mammals, but they will feed on pets occasionally too if there's no other food sources around. And they need to eat once about every 5 to 7 days or so. And once they get that blood meal, then they're a bit of a reclusive insect in that they'll go and hide, and then they'll digest for that 5 to 7 day time period. Occasionally, in really heavy infestations of them, they'll be all over the place, and that reclusiveness kind of disappears. But if there's a smaller infestation, they tend to be rather reclusive, and that's why they're a little harder to find sometime if you just have a new infestation.
And you're fascinated with this topic, Kathleen. Why, I have to ask.
Well, we're fielding a lot of questions at the Extension office. Douglas Sarpy Extension is fielding a lot of questions on bed bugs in general right now. And we've gone from practically zero, as short as 3 years ago, to usually there's, sometimes 1 or 2 a day. Where people are asking questions about bed bugs. And while they don't vector any diseases, which is a good thing, what they do is they cause all kinds of grief and things like that to homes and families.
Okay, and we're going to talk about how to get rid of them in just a little bit. But first, important to note that there's actually a difference between something called a bat bug and the bed bug.
That's true, yes. And if you look at them, plain on, they just look like the same thing. You don't really know that there's a difference. But it is important to note the difference, because one denotes that you have a bats in the house somewhere, and the bat bugs are coming on the bats into the household. And so your strategy for getting rid of those bugs are a little bit different, in that you need to find the source of the bats, how they're getting into the house, exclude them from the house, and then you can deal with the bugs that are remaining. Whereas bed bugs, it's an entirely different thing. These tend to be a little more persistent problems, and they're harder to get rid of than bat bugs are. But it's important to note the differences between the two, and just today we had one brought in where they were sure it was a bed bug, and instead it was a bat bug. And so we talked about how the bats could possibly be getting into the home. So yeah, very important.
As with so much else, bed bugs have a history of their own. Take us back a little bit, provide us a little education here.
Yeah, so if you go back to when we all lived in caves, The bats primarily were the ones that had the bat bugs on them, and we all shared quarters together, so the bugs weren't unknown to go to feed on us as well. We eventually moved out of the caves into households, and the bat bugs came with us. With that, then there's some speciation that took place where now we have separate species of bugs that are now bed bugs instead of bat bugs. They're actually a different species. And while their feeding habits are similar, how they travel around are vastly different. And so it makes a big difference to know the difference between the two of them.
Yeah, especially, Tom, since they're not going anywhere, right? The numbers are actually on the rise, and we have, I don't know, just talk to us about this increase.
From, as Kathleen mentioned, the activity for both bedbug inspections as well as treatment has picked up significantly. If I look at our business over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen significant growth in the amount of activity from the standpoint of inspections as well as treatments. If I go back and look at our business 5 years ago, it was basically a blimp on the radar screen. It wasn't a lot of activity at that point in time, but over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a significant growth, outbreak. I shouldn't say outbreak, just activity as associated to that, to the point where we've added resources, different types of equipment to eradicate bed bugs, as well as we'll talk a little bit later with Doug, a canine unit that actually sniffs out bed bugs.
Okay, and we do have a graphic we want to put up for our viewers of the top 15
Okay.
cities.
Okay.
We should be a little relieved to know that, you know, nowhere in Nebraska.
Right.
We won't appear there, but we'll talk about Nebraska in a minute. But walk us through, Tom, these most infested cities.
Well, to put this in perspective, Kathy, for your audience, this list actually comes from a report that was put together by one of the national pest control companies. They gathered information, I believe it's over a 6-month period of time, based on the calls that they were receiving into their call centers, based on bed bug questions and activities. And so that list of 15 was created based on that report. From my perspective, as I look at this thing, what sticks out to me is this used to be commonly known as an East Coast phenomenon, okay? But you're starting to see now cities in the Midwest popping up. With the exception of Los Angeles, you're really not seeing anything west of Denver. So there are some striking things that come out of this list. The thing that is even farther striking is that there's 4 cities in the state of Ohio listed there out of the top 15. So I certainly would have some concerns if I was traveling to the state of Ohio.
Wow. And Kathleen, Nebraska. Tell us, I mean, we saw some places somewhat close, but what are we really looking like here right now?
As far as
Just the bed bug issue in relation to maybe some of those other cities we saw.
well, we know in the Omaha area we're fielding lots of those questions. So is Lincoln, so is Kearney. Lots of things that a lot of, you know, really it's wherever people travel, they're more likely to bring them back. You know, for all practical intents and purposes, after World War II, bed bugs were extinct in the North American continent. So it was traveling to third world countries, accidentally bringing them back, that these are all bed bug sources that are not from the North American continent. They're all, and we're not really certain why the populations have risen so tremendously. There's lots of factors that we think go into that, one of them being travel. You know, people are traveling more than ever. But also there's some other things where we can be smart about how we travel so that we're not accidentally bringing those bugs home with us. There's been some resistance in the insecticides that we're seeing that were effective, maybe, you know, after World War II, that we're not seeing effectiveness now. So a lot of different things that could be going on there.
So Tom, she said smart as we travel, right? I don't think I mean, the opening video was proof of that, right? You can be someplace you wouldn't suspect there to be a problem. So, you know, just give us some basic practical pieces of information. For example, if a viewer might be watching here and they have a loved one coming back, even from one of those cities maybe, do they stop them at the door and start going through the luggage? I mean, what would they be doing if someone's returning back from?
Well, to your point, I mean, do a visual inspection as much as possible, looking for some bed or a bug activity, just to be on the cautious side of the things. Certainly they could reach out to us if there's some concern. we could come out and send an inspector out there to take a look at it. But for the most part, the general public should be just aware that the biggest part of this thing, as your opening dialogue said, they're considered the hitchhiker. And so that's just a part of the process. They do somehow get with the people that are doing traveling, and that's how they move from one person to the next person. So they just got to be cautious and be guarded of that. I know, Kathleen.
Yeah, well, and one thing I would add to that is we know that the female behavior, fertile female behavior, is where sometimes they'll get their blood meal and they'll hide, but they tend to hide in clumps. The fertile female will leave that group even, and she tends to be more of a wanderer, and they're the ones that are most likely to be the hitchhikers, and they'll get into the luggage and travel. And so suddenly, where you have just one bed bug, you have a fertile female, and when you consider she lays 3 to 5 eggs per day for up to 2 months, you can quickly have a huge population of bed bugs.
So paint a picture for us. You have someone coming back from a trip and they put their luggage down, right? Nowhere near their room. Maybe they put it down. So the bed bugs leave wherever they are and they just start to congregate to a bed or a chair, or, I mean, really, how's that work?
Well, again, they're looking for food, and when we get back into, where do they live, our history or the indication that we've got from an inspection perspective is that we typically see bed bugs within a 5-foot radius of the bed. And again, the bed is the key or primary area where somebody's going to sleep at night. As I don't know if Kathleen mentioned, but they're nocturnal, so they're more active at night. And so as people are sleeping, they have a tendency to wander and look for their food source. So where they live is really 5 feet radius of where the typical human being would be. So often we're seeing them in locations underneath the mattresses, primarily the box springs. There's typically some plastic, I'm going to say corner guards of a box springs. They like to kind of sneak in behind those plastics and bury themselves. Pleated pillow top mattresses, some area where they can hide into some corners and different things. So cabinets or nightstands, picture frames. So within a close proximity of the bed, headboard is often where we see bed bugs.
Okay, so Doug, all right, so we returned home, we're getting settled. At what point should we start looking to see if we have these things? A few hours, a day?
I would say the next day. I would say you go to sleep that night and then the next day, or you come home, put your stuff in the dryer right away, and then if you come home from traveling, put your stuff in the dryer like I would, and then the next day I would start looking around for evidence of the bugs.
So that's a great tip. You bring what you had, you put it straight into the dryer, because heat is, talk to us about heat.
Yeah, the dryer, heat kills them. The heat is the best way, I would think, to kill the bug, the bed bug. And the dryer is up to 170 to 190 degrees, and that kills the bed bug. You put your stuff in there on high for an hour, and you can pull it out and then put it back in your house and feel safe that the bugs, if they were there, they're dead there.
Yeah.
Let me the research indicates that the kill temperature for typical bed bugs is 113 degrees. So again, for the general public, if they were looking to try to be more preventative, proactive, as Doug pointed out, one safe way would be to immediately put your clothing or your bag into a heating dryer of element to get it to that level. Research suggests, I think it's the University of Florida, talks about time and temperature, and so based on the number of minutes at a certain time, basically gets a 100% mortality rate for bed bugs. I think they talk about a kill point being 113 degrees. When we're doing heat treatments, which is one of the most common ways that we rid bed bugs, we are cooking a room or a home for 3 to 4 hours at a minimum of 120 degrees, largely because we're trying to get we're saturating the wall cavities. Not only are we trying to get the inside of the house, but bed bugs have a tendency to gravitate behind walls. They're going to move away from heat. So they're getting into wall cavities behind outlets. And so the temperature has to get such to the high level that it actually penetrates the wall cavity so that we're actually able to kill the bed bugs as well.
Okay, so let's back up a second.
Okay.
Someone suspects they've seen something that looks out of the ordinary. They call an organization like yours.
Sure.
You come, you do the inspection. You talked about heating up the place. The family leaves. I mean, talk about the process there.
Okay.
They're not going to be able to hang out.
Right.
When do they return?
Okay. The typical process, and actually, I think the North Platte story talked about fumication as far as a remedy. I'm not sure, I don't know a lot about that. The two methods that we use for getting rid of bed bugs is chemically and then doing heat. When you look at the percentage of our business, 70% of our clients request the heat element, largely because it's fast. We're in there one day, and that same day they're able to move back into that apartment or that home and go about their normal duties. So the process for us for heat, we'll pull up with one of our units. We've got several different types based on the size of the property that we're going to be treating. For example, if it's a large house, we'll pull up in a unit that kicks out over a million BTUs. So we're able to generate a significant amount of heat. We've got air movers, air handlers inside the home where we're moving air around in the home to make sure that all areas of the house, whether it's upstairs, bedrooms, bathrooms, the kitchen, are getting that saturated heat of at least 120 degrees. And so, as I shared with you, typically we'll heat that house up for a minimum of 3 hours to make sure that we're completely saturating the entire house at that level so we're able to kill the bed bugs.
So Tom, prep work, and maybe you mentioned it, but
Right.
what are those families needing to be doing
There's a
before
lot
you
of
get
prep
there?
work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of prep work that goes into it. People like Doug, and we've got another technician that work very closely with homeowners or tenants. Certainly when it comes to clothing, we encourage all our tenants or our clients to put their clothing into bags, put them in dryers, heat them up, and then store them off the property until we're done, and then they can bring their clothing back in. There are certain types of plastics that we're going to have to be cautious of because certain plastics are going to melt, as well as some appliances. You know, TVs, we got to be very cautious of that. So when we're starting to get the temperatures in the home of 130, 135 degrees, some of those things aren't susceptible to withstanding those type of heat. So there is a significant amount of prep work that needs to go into making sure the house or the apartment is prepped properly for us to do an effective job.
We set probes out everywhere so that
Yeah.
we do not melt our
Yeah.
TV. So
Good point,
we
Doug.
know how hot
What
it
we
is.
also do is we have a set of internal monitors where we're taking monitors or probes and putting them in different parts of the house to make sure we're measuring the temperature. We also take those same probes and we put them in wall cavities so we can measure the heat inside the wall cavities. Again, we want to make sure that all those probes, every time we're checking temperatures, that we're at least 120 degrees. And if they're not, then we're moving air handlers around to push more of the direct heat into that area.
And Doug, to ramp things up a little bit, right? They bring in you and your partner.
Yeah.
Before we talk specifically about what the two of you do together, tell us about your dog.
Decoy is a black lab from Georgia. I got him 2.5 years ago. He has been trained since a puppy to detect the scent of a bed bug. So I have been working with him for 2.5 years. Every day we work. And here he is getting closer to me. So yeah, he, now I lost my spot, what I was saying, but for 2.5 years, him and I have been working closely together, and then about a year ago, we came on board with Tom and Pest Solutions, and right about the same time as that, we went down to a place called Ironheart down in Kansas, where we had another certification done with Decoy down there, and
Yeah,
They-
Kathy, there's 2 nationally accredited bed bug sniffing detection centers in North America. One happens to be a place called Ironheart down in Shawnee, Kansas. And so, again, I'm big on trying to differentiate my business, and here's a great opportunity for us to bring in a canine unit and then take it to another level of certification. And
Yeah,
so I
thank
asked Doug, and we were pleasantly surprised by the head trainers down there saying that Decoy and Doug were one of the best units that they've had come in through that organization. So we're proud to be having them part of our Pest Solutions 365 team.
Doug, you're one of the best teams. Why? I mean, what sets you apart?
I think the fact that him and I work so well together. We have set a bond aside from maybe other dog teams. I can't speak for those dog teams, but we work so well together. He knows what I want from him, and and vice versa. But it's just we work so well together, and we do it, like I said, every single day. So that might be why it sets us above and beyond.
So again, paint a picture for us. You're on the call, right? You get out of the vehicle, and he's anxious to get in there. What are we talking in terms of time and discovery and so forth when you have a dog like that?
With Decoy, it takes minutes to do a house or an apartment or whatever dwelling we're doing. With a trained pest control operator, it could take an hour or more. So that's why we use the dog. So, I mean, we get out, it could take, like I said, 10 minutes per apartment, 20 minutes per house.
Tom,
Kathy,
how many
I think it's important to distinguish between, I'm going to say, a trained inspector, human inspector versus a dog. When you get into some of the research that they suggest, the accuracy level of bed bug detection from a human being, from an inspector, is about 30 to 35%. Now when you start, again, that's based on a visual looking for bed bugs. Now you bring in a canine unit like Decoy and Doug, the accuracy level goes to about 95 to 97%. So we can give our clients a higher level of comfort knowing that we've got a unit that is, the accuracy level is significantly higher than myself or another inspector going in looking for bed bugs.
So Tom, they're one team. When do you bring them in? Which cases, you know?
Well, again, a lot of it has to do with the preference of the customer. Again, having myself out or another inspector is typically a free service. Now we're bringing in a dog in a unit specifically that's been trained, so there's an expense associated. So typically we charge about $150 an hour for both Doug and Decoy's time. And so if we go to an apartment complex, we're trying to maximize as much of that hour's time or 2 hours to hit, 5 or 6 apartments in that given hour. So maybe 12 apartments get done for $150. So it's a reasonably low investment for that assurance that they're bed bug free.
Yeah, Tom, how do we know that we're bed bug free? I mean, you guys come in, you do your thing, it all seems, like it's shaken out the way it's supposed to. Then you go away and the psychology sinks in, right? I mean, how do we know they're really gone?
Right. Well, it'd be great to bring Decoy and Doug back in immediately. Unfortunately, because of some of the chemicals that we use in our extermination process, it would actually impact his ability to smell the bugs. So using Decoy is limited from that perspective. I think it's 3 weeks, Doug?
3
at
weeks
a
to a
minimum.
month, yeah.
So we can't bring Decoy in once chemicals have been applied. So typically we're relying on a human being to go in there and re-inspect and looking for visible signs of fecal matter, staining, talking with our client and our customer to see if they are continuing to get bit. We're also looking for some indication of the actual bed bug itself, whether they're larger sized ones, are we seeing some of the smaller ones? So we're looking for those type of things as well. So getting back to answer your question, it's difficult, but again, it's based on a visual re-inspection of the property to see if we're seeing where we're catching things.
What percentage of folks do you need to go back in and do
Well, a part of our normal protocol is that we do a re-inspection just to assure them that we're doing it. Very few times do we have issues, especially if we're using heat.
So
heat in our eyes is the most effective way to remediate bed bugs.
Okay, and excuse me, it generally, is that the way, I mean, they're one company, is that generally the way that folks operate? What we're hearing today from this one company, is that across the board the way it normally works, Kathleen, then?
No, no, because we field a lot of questions for people that don't have the financial means to hire someone like Tom. So then we deal with that. A lot of times it's all about isolating yourself. So if you can sleep at night knowing that you're not going to be fed on, then you're going to sleep better. And the longer you can get that bed bug to where it's 6 months since it's had a blood meal, then it's going to dehydrate. And so we want to encourage that as much as possible. And there are things that you can do. So it's all about isolating the bed, pulling the bed away from the wall, putting the interceptor type devices. These go under the legs of the bed. And what happens then is the bed bugs trying to get to you, they're attracted by your smell, both your hormones and your carbon dioxide that you give off. They're attracted to that smell. They want that blood meal. So they'll crawl up in these troughs around here. It's almost like a little moat. And they're coated with talcum powder. And so they don't get traction to go up the leg of the bed then. So again, you want to pull that bed away from the wall to isolate it as much as possible. If you have a bed skirt or if you have blankets trailing from the bed to the floor, you want to get those off of there because, again, you want to minimize the amount of movement from the floor to the bed. And then once, if you suspect you do have bed bugs on the bed, then there's other devices where you can get mattress covers or box spring covers. And they're so tightly woven, they're so well made that bed bugs can't, if they're caught inside there, will never be able to leave those devices. Or if they happen to try to hide, there's no place to hide on them, like Tom was describing. They hide on the seams of mattresses and things like that. So it's, again, ways you can eliminate them from getting on the bed. They also have a new type of thing where it's almost like a tent that you crawl into at night and zip yourself in. It's made of the same type of fabric and zippers as what the mattress covers are. And so you can crawl in these at night, zip yourself in, and know that you're not going to be feeding anything. So those are great low-cost alternatives for people that don't have the means to hire someone.
Right, in about 30 seconds here, you have traps, right? And I don't think we've put those up for our viewers, and we can do that briefly just so they can see what these look like.
Yeah.
Maybe 15 seconds?
So as Tom mentioned, how do you know afterwards? You could put some of these out, and they'll get stuck in there. They're coated with glue, and you can put them under your bed, under your mattress, under your pillow, and check to see regularly.
So Kathleen, for those people who are watching and they don't have the means, to bring someone in, just in little time remaining, what's your advice to them then?
Contact the Extension office. We have some materials available that we can show you a lot of the things we talked about today. We also have created a listing of all of the information that's out there. There's almost too much information on the web now, and nothing they can purchase as homeowners will be effective against bed bugs. That's important to know.
Okay, and we don't want people to push the panic button, but maybe to go to one of the websites. We like at the end of a program to put up some resource information, and I know that both of you have websites. The first one here is lancaster.unl.edu/pest, and then of course pestsolutions365.com. Interesting topic. I'm sure people will sleep very soundly tonight after watching this program. But in any event, Kathleen, Tom, Doug, and of course Decoy, thank you all very much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
You bet. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.